Let's go back to this now. South Africa has taken a major step towards strengthening trade ties with China as Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition Pak Stau and China's Minister of Commerce Wang Wentao have both signed a new economic partnership agreement that is aimed at expanding duty-free access for South African exports, also unlocking greater investment into the local economy. To further unpack this, let's welcome Mr. Nkanyiso Ngqulunga, who is a lawyer who specialises in competition law, consumer protection, as well as international trade law. Nkanyiso, welcome to SA Today. Thank you so much for your time. So briefly outline this deal as, of course, South Africa seeks to further re-diversify and cast the net far beyond the normal scope of allies for trade relations as well as strategic partnerships. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. So we've seen the minister signing a trade deal with the Chinese. And this deal comes at a time where our economy has been heavily hit by the 30% tariffs, the Americans. You can recall that Chinese trade with South Africa dates way back. And in 2023, in fact, China became South Africa's largest trading partner after surpassing the EU. So, and I think the minister is trying to diversify into South African markets because the impact of the 30% tariffs that were imposed by the Americans on Liberation Day were impacting largely our automobile industries, our fruits industry, and our agricultural products that we export to the US. So, and we've seen recently that the Americans have decided to extend AGOA by a year. So even with AGOA in place, there's still a war that's caused by the 30% tariffs, of which the South African government have tried to negotiate. And as of last year in October, we know that the trade negotiations actually did not go well.
Let's further expand on that, Nkanyiso. So does this have any similar objectives as the now uncertain AGOA that you've just mentioned, deal, Nkanyiso? So maybe just unpack the discrepancies in these two and just how much of an impact this deal will then have in also promoting local products intra-trade with China. We are already seeing quite a success in terms of the Chinese vehicle market doing exceptionally well within the country.
Yes, that's correct. For a very long time, when South Africa was trading with the Chinese, we've had a number of problems that South African businesses and South African economy it did not have as much access to the market. And we've seen that needs have in fact accelerated and opened the market up for South African products by creating these pathways into trade, by duty-free products for South African exports to come in China's market. China has been quite proactive in our economy through automobile industry and through other manufacturing industries that have, in fact, in the country. And the loss of the American deals through trades have, in fact, impacted quite a number of industries in South Africa. So this new deal with China will, in fact, boost South Africa's economic growth and the markets, because a lot of people lost jobs in the automobile industries because a lot of industries have had to cut down on their labor because of the tariffs. So having an alternative market like China will open up for South African businesses for the new markets. And the Minister of Agriculture signed a new deal, I think, at the peak of the G20 Chinese to, in fact, so more agricultural products to go into China. This will, of course, bring a lot of investment and money in the country. This also extends beyond just products of the Chinese technology as well, that the South Africans would stand to benefit because of the current global restricted access by the Americans. Currently, this presents also an opportunity for the South African market to also benefit from the Chinese technologies.
Nkanyiso, your line is a bit unstable, but I want to ask this. I mean, you've just mentioned the very important aspect of products there. For better understanding, then, which sectors would be at best to benefit from this deal? Is there perhaps a special focus on agriculture? It's still being formulated between the two as to where it would best benefit the two. I mean, even things like skills as well as knowledge sharing are quite central to mastering formidable, sustainable possible trade relations with a view to expand, of course, because according to the formal statements, it says that, of course, the negotiations it is expected to be followed by negotiations on an early harvest agreement by the end of March, which would then unlock duty-free access for South African exported products. So this is still, of course, something in the making.
Yes, of course. The details are still very sketchy because the negotiations would have to take place with the Chinese on to what extent then the South African businesses benefit from this duty-free. And I think that would still be subject to determination. I think that the South African government realizes that we stand a risk because of the de-industrialization in our economy. The risk is that with the tariffs in place with the Americans, of which also is one of our most important partners, certain industries like the automobile industry, like agriculture industry, textile industries, have been heavily hit by the tariffs. So in order for us to be able to then produce more locally and then sell it into the Chinese market, that would provide a much needed relief into our economy to keep the jobs and to keep our economy. So, but I think we also should recall that this still comes at a place where the geopolitical governance is broken and the negotiations with Americans have been heavily hit by a constant shift of the goalpost as to what is really that we have to meet as a requirement in order to get a deal with the Americans. It's been very hard. But the specific industries, to your question, that stands to benefit, it's going to be very mutual as the Chinese also seek to invest more into South African mining. We know that also mining is part of a critical for our economic growth. So they want to invest more into our mining industries in the country. They want to invest more into our manufacturing businesses as well as our agricultural products into China. But more details will be provided once the deal has been sealed, obviously by end of March, as it's been said by the minister.
And how would it then affect of course, overall consumerism as well as consumer rights or the protection thereof? Very quickly, Nkanyiso.
So obviously, I think in South Africa, we have competition authorities that are also tasked to complement our industrial policy. So this is to ensure the fairness and also to ensure that South African consumers are protected. As we have seen with some of the aggressive Chinese fast fashion industries like Temu and Shein that have been dumping a lot of cheap clothes into South Africa while also affecting South African businesses. So this will also be based on the proactiveness on what South African government is willing to concede on with regards to the implementation of our competition policies and consumer protection policies that we have in place. But our competition watchdogs do have policies in place to ensure that all South African consumers are protected against any form of unfair or any form of theory of harm that may occur in the course of this trade and remarkable trade deal with the Chinese.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Nkanyiso, because I was worried because local businesses are already complaining about the influx of course, Chinese business that is pertaining to South Africa. But unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there. Very comprehensive discussion there with Mr. Nkanyiso Ngqulunga, the international trade law specialist on the new deal between South Africa and China that is aimed specifically at expanding duty-free access for SA exports and also unlocking new investment potentials.